we're just gonna put your personal info up on screen right here.
Yeah, here's my
And like at first it's like your Instagram handle and your email, and then it's just home address. It just gets more personal the more you scroll.
mother's surname,
Yeah.
my first dog, first
Street
car
name.
model.
So Andy Pitcher, what street did you grow up on?
Did you have a childhood nickname?
Okay, so yes, so you are Andy, and and I am David, and this is our masterclass. How are you doing?
Doing good. All things considered, very
Yeah.
grateful. Keeping on.
Yeah, so you're still working in Philadelphia, is that right?
I'm working and I'm in Philadelphia. But I don't have any work in the city, which is interesting. I can hide away pretty much as long as I need. I track for groceries and come back. I'm fortunate to have like a from home thing.
Cool. So I got to know you at Stony Brook University, and at that time you were living in New York. So were you moving back to Philadelphia? Was that just a city you wanted to live in? How did you wind up back there?
So I was, living 5 minutes from campus on Long Island, which is like a historically unfairly expensive place, by design. Once I was through with university and I comfortably couldn't afford it, and I was like, well, I'll head out. I was fortunate enough to work a 2-month tour, so like a music tour. So I put all of my stuff in storage. I saved those 2 months of rent and use that money to move here, where my rent is much cheaper and I have a much nicer place.
Sweet.
And I was lucky to already be working remote. That was a funny thing about the whole, everyone had to start working from home, and everyone's like changing their diet so that they have like shelf stable food and all this. And all of a sudden, it was basically like everyone was so sad. They were, so depressed about it. And I had to look at myself and realize that this was what I did by choice. And I was like, oh, what have I done wrong? That I'm like living my best life, like working from home, just eating beans. What have I done? So
I mean, some people's personal nightmare might be the situation in which you thrive.
Yeah.
Now, I got to know you as a member of the Deep Roots Ensemble at Stony Brook University. Okay, so I'm kind of curious because I wound up playing mandolin with that group. But when I first got in there, you were playing mandolin in the group and guitar as well. And I was like literally learning how to play this instrument in rehearsals. So I was curious about how you kind of wound up with Taylor and the gang.
I had met Taylor at some new music event at Stony Brook. I think it might have been through Daria. And Taylor took me under a wing and for a little bit showed me how to use the electronic music studio there, which for like the unfamiliar is one of the like least utilized and most expensive electronic music studios on the East Coast. They have the largest series of Buchla ever built, and just like unconscionable amounts of potential in that space. And Taylor was really using it. I am very into music electronics, and so Taylor thought I should be familiar with this space. Through being friends there, eventually I think the invitation got open to come play with the Roots Ensemble because I had a similar familial upbringing where my father was a musician and was very into the same kind of American music history. And it was something that I had, maybe lost touch with a little bit. Is it just, my father isn't in my life anymore. And it was really a lovely time to be able to join that and to get to experiment with, similarly to you, different instruments where, I'd played some banjo and I played mandolin, guitars as a primary, but to be able to go in there and like really spend time like learning tenor banjo or like mandolin more than just like the sprinkles on top of something, as like a driving force. It was what a gift that time was.
Yeah, it was a great musical experience, probably one of the top things I did while at Stony Brook.
I totally agree.
The analog electronic music studio at Stony Brook is insane.
Yeah.
And I only wish that I had a bit more experience with electronic music and that kind of analog technology before I got there, so that I would have felt a little less daunted. Because you walk in the room with all these different synthesizers and these oscillators and this patch bay and these huge, spinning things. It's like I've just stepped into Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory, and I'm just like trying to take in everything going on. And you take an electronic music class when you're a composition student. So I did record some bloops on magnetic tape and do a little bit of basic splicing, but nothing of like artistic merit. And I kind of regret that I didn't pursue that a little bit more. So you play guitar on the track Going So Soon off of my upcoming album, Pictures at an Inhibition, coming out on April 30th. But you don't just play any regular guitar. You play what I've listed in the track as electronic guitar. Would you like to talk a little about what that means? What's the difference between like an electric guitar that people know and electronic guitar?
That was a distinction I kind of like half joking stumbled upon in, trying to write about my approach a couple of years ago. My work, my labor work, my paying rent work is in the world of music electronics. So primarily effects pedals and amplifiers are things that I've helped build, help design, help repair, help educate people on use and such since I was 18. Through doing this, I kind of developed a hybrid guitar style that tries to reference a lot of electronic-based music, but in real time, with a lot of sampling and real-time manipulation, so that I could perform music that sounds heavily edited in a studio space, but with a consistency that I could play the same track over and over and get these same stretched out and cut up and, pitch shifting sounds and stuff like this to, whether it's changing the envelope of the guitar so that it's, something an acoustic couldn't create naturally, or the attack of the envelope or the decay of the envelope, or just the texture, or, there are all sorts of different avenues to explore with this. And I found that saying I play electric guitar often brings up an image, I mean, electric guitar, 1969, Woodstock, Jimi Hendrix, it's like, all these things that I'm not and probably can't do. And if there is a worthwhile distinction to say I play electric, I play acoustic, I play classical, I felt like it was fair to say I play electronic guitar.
Yeah.
And this track especially, I felt like towards the end, there's a lot of that on display.
Yeah, for sure. So without giving too much away, this particular track, it starts off like, oh, this is a David song. This is a song that is David. And then these various musical elements come in, including your electronic guitar playing. And especially at the end, things really transform in a weird and beautiful way. And I remember for the ending, you sent me 3 tracks, separate tracks. And I don't know what your intention was. I thought maybe you were offering 3 different options of endings. And instead I was like, I think all 3 of these could do real nicely on top of each other together.
Yeah, that surprised me. But pleasantly. Yeah, you were right in your hunch that there are, perhaps options or material to cut between or material to even compose with, if you want to cut and rearrange. But what you ended up with really, I sat there and listened to the final mix on my monitors and was like, whoa, oh my goodness. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. In particular, I was working with my friend Jason, who mixed and mastered everything. And usually with my songs, there's like a pretty clear point of reference. Maybe not in terms of like a specific song, but like in a particular style, especially as instrumentation builds up. But there were a couple songs, this one included, especially at the end, where I had no reference point for what was happening or what this was winding up sounding like. So I kind of sent it to Jason, was like, end this somehow. And then he tweaked some things, and then I had a little bit more to say kind of on the creative front as that was going along. But we found this really nice kind of basically an 8-bar phrase between 2 composite guitar parts that just worked really, really well, I thought. And so we just wound up kind of looping that, creating an ending where all of this kind of musical mass starts to fade away until we're left with that guitar part, which ends
Mm.
kind of on its own. And usually I'm not a big fan of looping,
Mhm.
but when it comes to kind of looping larger sections, I'm more open to it. And speaking of looping, I was very not familiar with pedals until, well, maybe until you like gave a talk about music pedals in one of the electronic composition classes.
Yeah, the graduate course.
Yeah, so that was a really eye-opening experience because I think before that, my only real experience with pedals was loop pedals
Mm.
that singer-songwriters bring up on stage, and they kind of gradually lay down structural elements of the piece and then click the loop pedal so that that bit loops, and they record something else on top of that, and then they click it, and then that loops as well, until eventually they build up this composite accompaniment.
Yeah.
And I hate that. It's one of my
Yeah.
least favorite things.
It's hard to, when you've began the like eighth ostinato that you're gonna have to listen to for the next 3 minutes, it's scary. There are devices that are, I think, pushing that a little bit where you can drop out, oh, your first loop will now stop after 8 repeats. And it's being addressed, but goodness gracious, yeah, it can be tiring.
Sure.
It can be tiring.
I'm glad I'm finally able to talk through this with someone. But I think that's what was very much in my mind when I thought pedals. It was the kind of limited ability, and especially when it came to looping, of just, it's kind of like seeing how a magic trick is done and then someone doing that magic trick.
Yeah.
It's like you get to see exactly how the sausage is made, and now here's the sausage for, like you said, 3 minutes. It's like, no, we had enough sausage before. Is this analogy working?
I think so.
Okay.
Especially with like perhaps when you talk about pedals with folks who are not familiar with them, even outside of musical interest, it's pretty much like, oh, wah-wah pedals? Because that is such an idiomatic sound, that isn't found anywhere else in nature, that like, it's distinctly guitar. And Ed Sheeran doing looping, basically, because he had such success doing this. So yeah, I definitely know what you mean, because those are points of reference.
See, I didn't know that Ed Sheeran was to blame for all this.
Partially.
Okay. I won't unleash my full fury upon him then. It's tempting.
Just partially.
Yeah. Okay. That makes me feel better. But a lot of the kind of effects pedals that you work with, at least my understanding of them, are generally adding effects onto your sound that would perhaps more commonly be applied to a sound after it's been recorded in the studio. But instead, giving the performer the ability to control those different parameters in real time in a performance context.
Yes. Say in the 1960s, we developed techniques for a few different types of adding reverb to a sound for a natural echo, or tape flanging, where you could play a recording next to itself on physical tape machines and slow them down a little. And how they interact creates this very interesting filtering and motion. And then come, 1970s, 1980s, and people want those sounds, with an immediacy. If you can't perform music accurately live to the recording, is it worth using that sound in the first place? That's a conversation people would like to have. To be able to plug into something like this and get that sound that otherwise you'd never be able to reproduce live, you've just opened up whole new avenues.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say performance immediacy, and then, in turn, this has inspired people who have never been in a studio space and now have access to these sounds.
Something that I've kind of had in mind in terms of my own recording is, how do I want to record something or create a recording that isn't actually indicative of what you're going to get if you see me in concert, right? The idea of either the recording as the product in and of itself, and then the performance kind of a recreation of it, or should the recording be an accurate representation of what the performer is capable of doing? And I've tended, I think, just through my classical upbringing, in being like, well, it should be the same. Like you should be performing at recording level quality all the time. And it's only recently, I mean, it's really been with this album that I kind of said, you know what? Maybe everything I release doesn't need to just be voice and piano. Maybe I can bring on other instrumentalists and other vocalists with the understanding that, yeah, if you come see me play this album at a show, we're not going to have all that stuff. But the songs are still the songs and I'm still me. But that is definitely a question that is just going to continue forever, I think.
Yeah, and some people understandably really strive for that one-to-one. I mean, it is for music consumers who may not be like music practitioners, it seems to be the highest compliment to say, oh, I saw them live, it sounded just like the record.
Yeah.
Which is fair, but I think to recognize the value of like a play versus a movie of the same story, they're different experiences. And I think it might be easier for someone who's less familiar with recording music to recognize that, and appreciate the difference between a film adaptation and a play adaptation of a story. They're different
Yeah.
mediums. And why not, maximize the work that you can put in to one, in a way that you can't the other.
You said you were 18 when you first kind of started getting into effects pedals. How did that come about?
That's when I got into them professionally.
Oh, I see.
So my father, I would say, was like a folk guitarist, probably most accurately, played acoustic. I had little toy guitars when I was a kid and got the idea and the motion in my head. On Christmas, when I was 10, I got my first like full-size normal human guitar that my father had picked out for me, but he unfortunately had passed that September.
Oh,
and
gosh.
So it was just one of those timely, like, well, I should really learn to play kind of things. And, it took me a couple years to get around to it, but I was very interested from that point out. And I had already been listening to music obsessively since I was young. In this kind of interim of me actually like learning to play when I'm like 13, 14, and me being interested in it, I was just learning a lot about guitar. I'd go to the library and I'd get books about guitar, and I'd learn like what is a pickup, which like with this device, it's a magnetic device that picks up the sound of the strings moving, and just kind of learning this stuff and this like lifelong obsession with technology and my early desires to be like an engineer, like a robotics engineer or something when I was very young, kind of turned towards music and music technology, but still coming from a background of performed music where synthesizers weren't interesting to me, as they are now. I'm very interested, but as a kid, I don't know, maybe it was a naive purist kind of thing. But this obsession allowed me a lot of time where I was home taking care of my younger sisters because my mom had to work, as a single mother now. And so I was just home all the time on the computer, and I'd learn about a certain chip or a certain transistor that was used in a pedal, and I would just chase it to the very end that I could. Be like, what is this? Why is this? Why do people care about this? Should I care about this? And yeah, so before I really could play at all, I was interested in the electronic side of it. It was a couple years later until I learned how to practice and actually like improve my playing. But from the get-go, it was very pedal oriented. And but this like feverish learning period paid off when I was 18. And I was lucky enough for the opportunity, and I was prepared enough to take it, kind of thing. And I joined a company as a pedal builder, and that kind of bloomed up until now. It's what I do for living, kind of, is working in this music gear world.
That's very cool.
Yeah, very, very fortunate. Very fortunate work, because it's clogging my brain. So I'm glad I could use it.
True. I was going through your various social media feeds prior to our interview, and you do two things that I think are very cool. One of which is kind of demoing these various pedals so that even we lay people can get in our ears what these various effects sound like. And there's very cool. It's a world that I am very new to, and it's just huge. There's so many things you can do. And also, every once in a while you take these photos, and I believe the guitar next to you is an example of this, of Tao Guitars,
Yeah.
which they make the sexiest guitars I think I've seen. Like I tend not to geek out about guitars because again, that's not really my musical world. But every time you post a photo from Tao Guitars, it's something just beautiful.
Yeah.
Who are
Yeah.
they? What is going on there?
Tao is a team in Brussels, Belgium. John and Serge, they teamed up about a decade ago. They're two of like the top vintage repair luthiers in Europe.
Mm.
And when you can approach what is quickly becoming a priceless instrument, you know, vintage guitars that were originally sold for $200, $300 are now worth six figures comfortably.
Mm.
You know, very easy for you know stuff to sell for that much money. When you have the know-how to do that, there is an understanding of material that surpasses a lot of other people approaching guitar from the ground up rather than from an object to restorate, to undertake in restoration. And this incredible sense of material and respect for design, be it traditional Japanese construction or American or European cars or architecture. I would just make these like, you know, it doesn't have to be a guitarist guitar, you know, it's just like as an object, they're like beautiful designs and there's just a lot of thought. I played one on that tour I had mentioned earlier, the 2-month tour, and I've been lucky through work to play a lot of those like priceless vintage instruments. They're fun. I get it. I get why they're expensive, but I was always really content playing very inexpensive instruments. You know, I played a lot of like sub $200, sub $300 guitars just because I was curious how much I could do with that.
Sure.
And when I played a Tao, it was the first time that I was like, oh, you could tell me this was $20,000 and I would believe you and understand why. Because the design is beautiful, but the feel and the sound are one of a kind. And we became friends after I tried that one that my dear friend Ryan Miller owns, that this is kind of like the evil cousin of or something. Yeah, and we just, you know, designed it over email back and forth. And I try to leave them gaps in my request for them to fill in with their own expertise because I loved their work so much. And yeah, this thing came to be. The top is like washi paper, which is like a very dense Japanese paper that you make by like shaking pulp over a screen and letting it fall where it naturally wants to, which gives it like a really great feel and look, but also a sound because I designed electronics in here that pick up vibrations through like piezo or like contact mics that you would see used a lot in musical environments. I have one embedded in the wood. So every, you know, I can turn it on, every interaction with the instrument is musical, kind of that.
That's cool.
Concrete, like cage line of thought, where everything could be valid. But I mean, everything from like I can hit a switch and it goes into my sound processing with the pedals and everything. So yeah, they do something unique. And mine is serial number 52. So there aren't that many. They've been out for 10 years and there's only 54 of this model at this point. They've made a couple after mine. So, you know, I track them down whenever I can. There's a really lovely guitar shop, Statuary Guitar Boutique on Long Island. Their owner, Mike, is a great friend and helped me a lot trying a couple Taos before I settled on getting this, because I wanted to make sure I didn't just play like the perfect one.
Sure.
You know? And I was like, oh, these are consistent. These are always good. They're all as good as the last. And it doesn't matter if the specs are totally like not my bag. They're their own thing. And yeah, so I just chase them down wherever I can find them, you know. I'm very fortunate to have one of my own now.
That's sweet.
And the recordings on your record that I did were with this guitar is one of the first things I got to record with it.
Oh, cool. Wow, if you want to hear that beautiful guitar, tune into Going So Soon. Oh, lovely. I was talking to Andy before we started filming that I've been trying not to have all these interviews just revolve around music solely. And I think I've, up until now, generally failed. But I have this little book. Called The Book of Questions. So I found one here in for you, Andy, mainly because it's just such a ridiculous premise. I had to ask somebody this. And here's the question. Would you get a tattoo the size of a dinner plate if you knew it would somehow save the lives of a busload of innocent tourists who would otherwise die? If so, second question, what tattoo design and location would you select? Now, how do you feel
Wow.
about how do you feel about tattoos in general?
I like them.
Mm-hmm.
It is not something I am often in a place financially that I think I should procure one.
Mm-hmm.
If money was not a thing, I'm sure I'd have more. I have a single tattoo.
Oh,
I have I have a tattoo of Blinky from The Simpsons, the three-eyed fish
okay.
from season 2, episode like 14 or something, on my leg. I got it from a dear friend who's a tattoo artist, and I went to say goodbye because she was moving for work.
Mm.
I went with a friend who was getting something done on his arm, and we stayed a long while, and we're just talking the whole time, and kind of came up, "Do you want anything?" "Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and
Mm.
I was already there, so we just did it, and it was brutal. Um, I will not put on some front. It was not fun, but I would do it again because that there is some fun in that not funness. It was on my leg. It wasn't a bad spot.
Mm.
It just
I mean, it's still just needles puncturing your skin a bunch, no matter
yeah,
where it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm open to this dinner plate. I think the hardest part
Mm.
is what?
Yeah.
What would it be?
It's gonna be big. People are gonna see it.
It's gonna be big. There is the obvious, I saved a busload of people and all I got was this lousy tattoo. Um, my other thought was just that it feels like so little of a price to pay to save human lives
Mm.
that the tattoo has to be bad.
Oh,
I don't know if this
interesting.
is some Catholic guilt, where I'm like, oh well, I'm doing good for someone. It has to really be a detriment.
Sure. It
So,
can't be
so I
two.
want a work.
It can't be two bonuses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need some real bad art. So, but I have to get the Sublime logo or something on my neck. Something I would never wish to put on my body permanently.
How about just Supreme, like on that red background?
In the Barbara Kruger font. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be pretty good. Actually, I'd really. My favorite. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that'd be pretty good. Maybe a portrait of Michael Shannon. I'm a fan of Michael's.
Okay.
I will.
But
Um,
would it have to be kind of like looking like it couldn't look too much like him, right? It'd have to be like, oh, is that who that is?
yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. Here, let me get
Oh my God.
perhaps, perhaps a portrait of Michael here. Um, my body would be a good.
Oh my Lord.
There's this great tattoo artist, Sean from Texas. That's
Uh-huh.
their go by. These really dreary, tongue-in-cheek, kind of cartoony things. The funniest one that always comes to mind. It was just an upside down Nike logo and said "Just Die." And it's just needlessly pessimistic. And I feel
Sure.
like a dinner plate size Garden of Heavenly Delights,
Mm.
but his style could really be hard to go to the beach or something. That
Yeah.
might be a good trade where I'd be like, yeah, I kind of like it, but I can't really show it to anyone.
So hold up now, Andy, though, because you just presented us with a huge, I believe, an actual painting of Michael Shannon,
Yeah, digital print painting,
digital print. Okay, I saw the
electronic.
canvas. I was like, who
It's definitely
did that one?
Canva, dude. Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah. So it wasn't like you wrote like a fan letter to Michael Shannon, and then he sent that back.
No, 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 no. This was a very well curated Christmas gift from a dear friend
Wow.
who was able to get an online service to print this. He had to find a photo that they couldn't pick as a celebrity because they're not supposed to print images like this, I suppose.
I gotcha.
But it worked. They even emailed him and asked if he would like them to Photoshop off blemishes for a $30 upcharge, thinking that this was my uncle or something. Who,
Sure.
might have a mole here or a wrinkle there.
You're good, Uncle Mike.
Yeah, my Uncle Mike. So I'm glad they didn't beautify Michael, because I think his quirks are what make him him, you know.
I
So
like to think so. Wow, you have great friends.
I'm very thankful. Yeah, I'm really, really, I'm grateful for this. There's a really, truly manic energy about the photo of me opening this. There's just a joy. There's just I don't know the feeling that the person in the photo was feeling. You know, it was so beyond my typical experience. But there's just a shock about it, you know?
Yeah.
There's a shock and a joy, but I'm glad
Yeah. I'm not even like a Michael Shannon stan. And when you brought it over, I felt something. It was powerful.
Yeah. There's something special about it.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, I think we found our thumbnail for this particular episode. My goodness.
It's Tao and Michael.
Oh my goodness gracious. So we've settled on a huge, slightly dodgy representation in tattoo form of Michael Shannon's face.
Yeah.
On your chest?
Yeah. I was thinking Chester back. I can maybe do thigh piece. If we're talking dinner plate, if I could like squish my leg up, you know.
Oh, sure.
I could get a dinner plate onto there. But that feels like too easy to hide.
Yeah. Everyone, you go to the beach, everyone should see it.
Yeah. Big deformed solar plexus Michael Shannon.
Yeah.
I will draw the line, not General Zod Michael Shannon with the facial hair. Maybe if it was 2 buses of people, but 1 bus, I'm gonna get it's a good photo of Michael. It's just not done that well. You know?
So if in this hypothetical situation where someone is holding a busload of tourists ransom and they make a demand that you get that Michael Shannon with facial hair, you're gonna be like, nah.
I'm gonna have to figure out what the tourists are about, you know. Where are they tourists? What are they touring? What are they admiring, you know?
Sure.
You know?
If they're like touring Yellowstone, I get it. I understand. If they're going to the Spam Museum in Minnesota,
it's worth a question. It's worth asking.
It should be in the discussion at least. Yeah.
So without the facial hair, no brainer. But General Zod with the weird Caesar cut, I'm gonna check in.
That's a big ask.
Yeah, I'm gonna check in.
Well, you have successfully saved a busload of tourists and have successfully survived this interview.
Great.
Thank you so much, Andy, for talking with me.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having me on the record.
Of course.
Very excited for people to hear it, and good time.
Good time. Good times were had. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You as well. I'll see you soon.